You're in the 06010. Focus. Fantasy Focus.
Welcome in to the preview show for Week 13 of the NFL season. Field Mike and Stephania, and you did not mishear us. As we have mentioned once or twice already on the podcast this week, today, Wednesday, is basically our Friday show. What that means is that we're going to try to give you as much insight as we would on a Friday, understanding that teams haven't even yet practiced. So especially the injury updates, most of which, of course, derive from Stephania, are considered incomplete pictures right now. Fluid is a good way of putting it. Yes. You need to make sure that you are checking your apps tomorrow before the 3 Thursday games begin, and then again on Sunday morning before the games that take place. I'm not really good at math. I think there's 12 games on Sunday before those are played as well. We have a lot to be thankful for. Tomorrow's big Thanksgiving Day, one of the great holidays of the year. One of the great.
I know. We've already had discussions about the menu. I'm so excited to have real cranberry.
A lot to be thankful
on Thanksgiving.
For. So much to be thankful for. But I'm wondering this, though, guys, because we had a little bit of a debate here. Quickly, we'll get to the football in a second. But for those that are unfamiliar with that little swear jar here, this cute little squirrel standing on top of a jar with just a couple of singles. No, I just want to make this clear. I thought, right, Daniel? You agree?
Definitely agree. Let's start with this.
Something. Yeah, that's important. Someone used a bad word, a naughty word.
Yes.
Before the show. But that someone, I won't mention who she is.
Yes.
Was referencing a humorous stand-up comedy routine.
Correct.
And said, no, that's in bounds. I can quote somebody else and use a naughty word.
So the problem is she was quoting someone who was quoting someone, I think.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
I was quoting Dave Chappelle. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, okay. I guess spoiler alert. It was Stephania. She did just out herself. Yeah. We were trying to not say that, but
I did my best. It's completely masked.
I had no idea.
I had no idea.
I know. She really could have gone anywhere. But
let me say, is that a swear word? Would you say that in front of Dot Mama? At Dot Mama, would you say that in front of her?
Actually, Dot Mama would be down with me quoting Dave Chappelle. She would probably laugh.
I think she would quote Dave Chappelle.
I don't. You guys.
She and I have a good relationship. We are
like. She is pure. She is sacred. She does not swear.
She does not.
Shucks darn fudge for life. Don't you ever put that kind of evil in the words.
Wow.
She's a little different when you're not around.
Mom and Dop and I are cool. We are good.
No, you are good. And you will be even gooder with her when you put $1 in that jar.
Dang right.
Rewind. Fantasy news
from the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
You should have to put $1 in for cutting me off with the sound.
It's not a cutoff jar.
But so we did talk about this before the show yesterday. I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to, if we can gather enough money, put the money towards something. So we're going to donate to a cause of some sort. I don't know what it is.
I'll happily drop $1.
I was going to say, so you can just start cursing like a sailor after the show's over, and you can just drop a 20 or a 50 or 100 or whatever.
It might come naturally if Daniel keeps it up.
I also went into my Venmo yesterday, and I saw a bunch of money from Matthew, and I'm like, why is Matthew? And I'm like, oh, wait, because Matthew is surly.
He prepaid. That's what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Matthew
you put your money from the bank in so that you can just take it out knowing that you're going to be fine.
But it's live, right? So do you have a bleep button so we can, if we're feeling charitable?
I think we need to implement a new rule where next year, if it's live, it's actually twice the amount, and if it's in the pre-show meeting, then it's a single amount. Because live is more egregious.
We have to write up rules here on the chalkboard or something.
Yeah.
Or we can ask ESPN for if we swear live on the show.
Yeah.
Rather than suspending us for a week and docking us a week of pay, just donate all of that to the jar, right?
Oh, that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Feel like that's a decent compromise?
I think it's a good compromise.
Okay, that jar is going to get full soon. Then if we just got to. Who would be the most likely to flub on the show? Let's be honest.
Mike Clay. It's totally Mike.
Yeah. Probably Keith.
I'm going to say darn. Is darn a curse word?
No, we decided that's not. No, we don't believe that's a word. But where a beaver sleeps is a bad word.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll say that for sure.
Okay, got it. But in the context of speaking where a beaver sleeps, because there would be no N. Right. Drop the different spelling for those two words, right?
There's a lot to remember.
I know. This is really...
Well, if we reference the Hoover Dam, that would be fine, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
I'm just going to straight up say the F word out of context for no reason.
No, because there is no other connotation for the F word, right?
That's a $4 word, too. Right, that other ones are 25 cents a letter, but that one is $1 a letter. Yep. That's what Mama
These are rules.
So don't say fart. Got it. Okay. Got it.
These are the rules. Let's get to the
fined.
football. Yeah, that's a 50-cent thing. Anyways, let's get to the football. And again, injuries are such a moving target this week. It's only Wednesday morning. So, Stephania, we kind of put together a major injury list. Actually, a couple of the players are playing on Thursday, but some of the other ones are just, given the gravity of how much they mean to their offense, they're important to note right now. Tyreek Hill for the Kansas City Chiefs, Stephania, left the Mexico City game in Estadio Azteca with a hamstring injury. He did not return, and the Chiefs were on a bye this week. So we don't really know if they had played this past Sunday. We have no idea if he would have played. What's your sense as they get ready for this game against Oakland?
Well, I'm going from Andy Reid saying that he expects him to be out there. So Andy Reid being that positive early in the week made me want to share it with our listeners because, typically with these hamstring strains, even when they're mild, we see that guys will miss extended period of time. He was actually lobbying to go back into that game. Now, remember, Mexico City, very high altitude. One of the things you're concerned about is dehydration. And you remember the Chiefs were talking about, they didn't go train at altitude, but they had their players pre-hydrate. And I think, given the fact that he felt anything in his hamstring, they decided, you're not coming back in this game. You're not going to risk it, especially here. And then he had the benefit of the bye week as far as recovery time. So obviously follow the notes, like you said, throughout the week. But I think the early indications are Tyreek Hill will play.
Okay, good news there. And if he doesn't play, we think that Mecole Hardman becomes a viable part of that offense. We've seen him fill in for Hill earlier, but also worth noting, when Hill was out, we had some good Demarcus Robinson games. We had some good Mecole Hardman games. We had some good Sammy Watkins games. Maybe not so much on the Sammy Watkins front, but still, I think there's a chance that Hardman could step into a larger role if Hill sits. Adam Thielen, Stephania, sort of reading the tea leaves here from the fact that the team waived Josh Dotson yesterday. Right. Adam Thielen, what do you think on that one there?
Well, that was exactly what I was going to say. That kind of adds to the credence that he would likely play this week. I think we've talked about him potentially coming back after the bye, after he aggravated the hamstring injury. So you guys remember, he had a hamstring issue when he tried to play. He missed 1 week because that game was on a Thursday night. He tried to play the subsequent week, and he only lasted a few snaps before he was forced to exit the game. And then, when a player has a setback in game like that, you usually expect their time that they're going to be removed to be at least as long as the first time. Sort of like that when team gets bitten by that. So knowing the bye was in week 12, I think the target has sort of been week 13 all along. Now week 13 is coming, and Adam Thielen is already practicing. So the signs do point to Adam Thielen playing this week.
Okay, that's good. And by the way, if he doesn't play, as we've learned, if Adam Thielen doesn't play, there's no next man up in the Vikings wide receiver group. It's just that Stephon Diggs remains hit or miss.
Yeah, it's more Irv Smith we've seen, a little more Kyle Rudolph. He's been playing the slot, but you're right. Yeah, it's Diggs and then maybe Rudolph. That's about it. Yeah.
It's Diggs and then pivot to a flex elsewhere, somewhere that's available in your league. Now, 2 injuries that we actually do have some info on, Stephania, because they play on Thursday. Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, 2 huge injuries for the Falcons.
Yeah, and Julio Jones, I think we are so used to him playing through things that you automatically think, okay, his shoulder, he's banged up, he's going to play. But now they're playing on Thursday. So all of a sudden, the timetable is shortened. He had an AC joint sprain. We know that it's very easy to aggravate these things. He was not practicing yesterday. So they will always give Julio until the last minute. But I think there is a reasonable concern that Julio could not play. Now, Devontae Freeman has missed the last 2 weeks because of a foot sprain. I didn't rank him this week, knowing that they were coming up on a short week, and I just didn't feel great about it. But he did put in a full practice on Tuesday, so now my eyebrows are raised, and that's why I wanted to bring that up. A full practice coming off of not doing much of anything makes me really want to see what happens the next day, which is today. So if he got through that practice okay and has a subsequent full practice, then I think Thursday is fine. And you also know that when these teams are listing full practices, yesterday the Falcons were practicing. What they do today, the day before game, is probably going to be very light. But if he's out there and projected as a full participant, then I start to think, okay, there's a good chance that he plays on Thursday.
Well, welcome back to Freeman. That's probably pretty good news for a lot of people. Mike, obviously a valuable player, even if he had not played particularly well so far this season. I'd imagine many people will have him in their lineups if he does play on Thursday. Julio's interesting. First of all, the silver lining, they play tomorrow night. So, unless your decision is Julio versus all of your flexes who might be playing in the first 2 games, you're going to be okay decision-making wise. If Julio sits, Mike, we know Calvin Ridley is already an involved part of their offense. Does it mean more Russell Gage? Is there a third Falcons wide receiver that all of a sudden you got your eyes on?
It would be Christian Blake. He had 8 targets this past week. He was filling in. Obviously, Julio missed some time during that game. He filled in and was targeted quite a bit in that one. He would step in there. I would, in that scenario, expect Marshawn Lattimore, assuming he's back and ready to go, to shadow Calvin Ridley. Obviously, that's a very tough matchup for Ridley, but it's going to be anyway, even if Julio plays, because Eli Apple is playing terrific on the other side of the field for the Saints. So either way, you're going to have Apple, either Apple or Lattimore up against Ridley. You'll have Blake on the other side against P.J. Williams. It really depends on who's healthy on the Saints side of the ball. And then Russell Gage Russell Gage will draw P.J. Williams in the slot if Lattimore plays. If not, he'll get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So I think the way to rank them if Julio out is Ridley you're still going to start. It's a tough matchup, but I think there's enough volume there for him to be a starter. Gage is a flex just based on the volume we've seen from him. And Blake, you're not going to start. Maybe if you're in a deep dynasty and you want to throw a dart at a young guy that can maybe show something and have some value long term, that's it. But you don't really have to pick him up.
And by the way, not listed here, but Austin Hooper still not practicing, so not looking like he'll be available this week.
All right, don't expect Austin Hooper. We'll see on Devontae
Wait, hold
Freeman.
on just 1 second. Julio Jones hasn't scored a touchdown in 8 straight games.
That would be correct,
can't
Daniel.
be real.
boy.
That's actually real, Daniel. After going 7 straight games with a score, he's gone 8 straight games without a score. So it actually has fed the beast of both sides of that argument, right? People that say Julio is really good and scores lots of touchdowns had 7 weeks of it.
Right.
People like you that say he doesn't score touchdowns now have 8 weeks.
Julio Jones is like the Matthew Berry of wide receivers because he talks out of both sides of his mouth.
That's,
How about this? That's a good point,
That's
Daniel.
just
You know what
not
I mean?
fair.
What do you say,
to
Daniel? Let's say a
Julio.
little bet. You know, I'm not even gonna board bet you. I'm gonna jar bet you.
You're going to jar bet me?
Jar bet me. $3, $5. I don't care. Name a price. Into the jar. If Julio plays, I say Julio Jones scores touchdown. I was going to say makes it into the end zone. That would be a little bit unclear.
Yeah.
If Julio Jones plays, I say Julio Jones scores.
I say if Julio Jones plays, he will not score, and I'm good for a $5 wager in the jar for that.
donation.
Oh, look at you, big timers.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'll just swear and get my $5.
Also, by the way, Kyle swore last night at bowling, and he just
No,
gave me
he
a
did
dollar
not.
to put in the.
What?
I
he
didn't.
did
I
not.
owed
I
him
do
a
not
dollar
believe you.
otherwise. Thank you, Stephania.
Appreciate
Appreciate that.
Stop. You know what?
you
Spreading
are-
rumors should be a fine.
Yes.
That's another $1. for
Agreed.
you.
Wait, no, this needs to be put it in the jar, right?
You know what? That was sort of clever, but the way that you said it, the delivery. I mean, it was pretty. It was pretty good.
It was good.
Yeah. You want to do? Do you want to do it?
It's too easy.
Put
Come
it in
on.
the jar.
Put it in
No.
the jar.
Put it in the jar.
No. Okay.
Put it in the jar. Put it in the jar.
I didn't want to steal the thunder from you
Put it
guys,
in the
but
jar.
whatever.
Put it
You
in
know.
the jar. $5 going in the jar one way or the other come Monday morning. All right, next segment here is an interesting one. I like the name here. Committee or committed? As in, like, is there one running back that you can trust, or is there multiple running backs which might make them all not trustable? Let's begin in Arizona. The Cardinals play against the Rams on Sunday. Believe me, the Rams are a defense still, despite what you saw on Monday night against Lamar Jackson.
Can ghosted be an option? Because I think
Yes.
there's a ghosting situation going on in Arizona.
What are the circumstances under which you would play David Johnson?
Right now, I wrote this down. I did not rank him. I was the only one of the three of us who did not, because I don't know if he's playing. He did nothing last week. This has nothing to do with what I believe David Johnson's talent is. It's that I don't believe, even when Cliff Kingsbury, I heard he said something after the game. Well, you know, it's not what he hasn't done. We just have to find ways to. I don't buy it. He's
Not me, it's
obviously
you.
moved on.
Not you, it's me. By the way, Chase Edmonds, according to Cliff Kingsbury, is expected to play on Sunday.
Yeah,
So you have
I still
Edmonds
need to see a
returning.
little more. He's
yeah.
barely coming back in practice. But
Based
the
off what
fact
we've
that
heard,
he's floating it out there,
Right, it
again,
could
not good for
possibly
David
happen.
Johnson.
I can't think of a circumstance under which I would play David Johnson this weekend. Now, could he take over the role and have 20 touches and be great?
Sure.
Of course, but I'm just telling you, if I had something on the line this weekend and I had David Johnson, I'm trying to play for the playoffs, I'd stay away.
Yeah, no question. I have the decision of Drake versus David Johnson. I just dropped David Johnson and picked someone else. I picked up Jonathan Williams, so I'm just going to start Drake as my RB2 in a league this week. So no question about it. I mean, if you look at the 2 games since Johnson returned, Drake has 94 snaps played to 36 for Johnson. The carries 26-5. The pass routes 46-20. The targets, this is probably the most significant one, 14-1. One target for David Johnson on 36 snaps. It's unbelievable. His efficiency in the receiving department is best among these backs so far this season, at least since they've all been on Arizona. Drake's been the better runner, I think. Johnson's only at 3.7 yards per carry. So you could somewhat understand that, but the lack of receiving work has been shocking. You just cannot trust him right now.
I think, look, in the War Room League, where I was trying to fight for a playoff spot, I had David Johnson, my starting right. It's a 16-team league. There's nowhere to go. I started Giovanni Bernard last week because I didn't feel good about David Johnson, and he got me more points than what David Johnson would have because it's that bad. It's that bad.
Let's go to Philly, where we have some injury updates first, Stephania, because we could talk about Jordan Howard being in the mix if we think Jordan Howard's even going to play.
He's still not cleared for contact as far as I understand. And so we'll have to see what happens this week. But that's been the issue, a stinger that he's dealing with. And even if he's symptomatically improved, if it's not to the point where they're comfortable with him engaging in contact, and there's nothing as of yet this week that suggests anything different.
I'm the only one that has Jordan Howard ranked, I believe, as of right now, which is why my Miles Sanders ranking is decidedly lower than you two guys. You both have Miles Sanders as a top 20 play. Obviously, if Jordan Howard does not play, then my ranking will align much closer with yours. The tricky part for Jordan Howard is that if he is cleared for contact, again, it's Wednesday morning, it's such a favorable matchup. If Jordan Howard plays, I think you crank him up. If he doesn't, though, you have to feel pretty good about Miles Sanders with Jay Ajayi just sort of out there, a little blip on that radar way far away.
Yeah, Ajayi had 6 carries on Sunday. He played 6 snaps. So they brought him in, he carried the ball and left the field, so that's about it. Boston Scott only played 3 snaps. So it's been the Miles Sanders show. In 2 games without Howard, Sanders has played 86% of the snaps. He has 23 carries, 9 targets, 133 yards, 19 fantasy points. He's obviously underwhelmed a little bit, but there is reason for optimism, A, because of that ridiculous playing time, but also on the season, averaging 4.4 yards per carry. That's solid. He's also averaging 9.6 yards per target. That's number 1 at running back. So he has been effective in the passing game. You've seen that on the tape. You see it in the numbers. And, of course, you mentioned the matchup. Dolphins, 5th most fantasy points to running backs, most carries, most rushing yards allowed. The yards per carry they've allowed is 4.7. That's 6th worst. Also, 4 receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs, which is a pretty high number. High yards per target, high catch rate to running backs. They've struggled in a lot of areas.
So, again, to reset, if Jordan Howard plays, you feel good playing him. If he does not, you feel really good about playing Miles Sanders. Even if Jordan Howard does play, you still feel confident enough to slide Sanders into a flex consideration.
Agreed.
Is what I would say. The Steelers are even more confusing than the Eagles right now, and James Conner made a comment that I think sort of tipped his hand for the week, Stephania.
Yeah, he had a radio appearance, and he was talking about sort of the dealing with his AC joint sprain. And reminder, it's at the tip of the shoulders, the ligament's there. He went back, 2 weeks ago, when he returned to action, and then he aggravated his shoulder, and then we haven't heard from him since. And he said it's really an issue of the stability, and he doesn't want to be in a situation where he would ultimately require surgery. So it tells you it was sort of a moderate sprain, and they're worried that should he have a setback where it is unstable, in other words, you don't let the ligaments scar down, and he has motion there, something that would make it really impossible for him going forward to play his position without chronic discomfort, then he is facing a surgery situation. It sounds like they've had that conversation. So the goal is to treat it non-surgically, and obviously that's why they're resting him so much, but it could mean more missed time for him while they wait for this to heal.
So let's not expect James Conner to play on Sunday. That means, Mike, I think, again, we go back to the Benny Snell show. Mike Tomlin was very complimentary of Benny Snell earlier on this week, and Jalen Samuels might just be a guy they feel much more effective involving in the passing game with Benny Snell as the workhorse running back.
Yeah, no question about it. You kind of felt that when you were listening to Mike Tomlin last week, right, that he was kind of anxious for Snell to get back because they wanted a reliable ball carrier because Samuels was not getting the job done. Snell played 49% of the snaps in that game, 22 touches, 103 yards. Only one of those touches was a catch. He actually had 21 carries in the game. Only ran 7 pass routes. Yeah. So obviously not a factor there.
That's the limiting factor here.
Yeah, and you saw Kareth White, Trey Edmonds step in there and have a few carries. But, yeah, Jalen Samuels still was the primary pass catcher, ran 13 routes, had 3 catches in the game. His route number was more than all of the other running backs combined. So he'll still be the passing down specialist. That, maybe in a deep PPR league gives him some flex value. I would stay away if possible, but Snell is the primary runner. And, by the way, Snell, I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
Who scored the only touchdown for the Jets in Super Bowl III? It was not Joe Namath. Remember, it was the famous Joe Namath game. He guaranteed
it.
They won.
Guaranteed.
He won the MVP.
Benny Snell, the first?
Senior.
Close.
Senior?
It was Matt Snell. It was a run to the left side, ran it in. That was the only touchdown the Jets
Is he
scored.
related to Benny Snell? Is that what
I don't
you're
know.
bringing up?
I'm wondering that.
Are you kidding me?
I don't know.
That's
well, I
not
just thought of it right now.
Trivia question.
Hey, Stephania, here's a question.
Guess who?
Who started this podcast? It was Steve Yates. Is he related to Field Yates? I don't know. His name was just Steve Yates.
Great nephew.
Great nephew. Is that right?
All right, Keith. Whose side are you on here?
Yes, they are related.
Oh, there you
cool.
go.
After the fact.
His great uncle.
Look at it.
What? There's no. What?
If only you could
I knew that. I knew all
search
along.
on this thing.
you knew
and
all along.
get a-
I knew all along.
Mike, that seat really is rubbing off
It
on
seriously is.
Listen, I was just thinking about. I know the history of the NFL. I was trying to show that off a little bit. I saw the name
you. Can we remove this guy? Can we have this guy removed?
I just don't
I
understand.
can't
it.
apologize for my knowledge.
The
of
game-
Super Bowl III, 1960. 1970.
You were there with Matthew?
1960, 1970.
That was one of the most important games.
Talk
in
to me
NFL
more about your
history.
NFL knowledge and how good you are with it.
1970,
What year was it?
Matthew sat him down in his lap when he was telling the stories of when I was there. I had Joe Namath in a PPR.
I wonder if Matthew knows that.
Points per route run. He was the quarterback.
Matthew was in middle school with Matt Snell, so
Stop.
Matthew is Matt Snell. That was his original name.
right.
His stage name is Matthew.
His stage name is Matthew Berry. Once he lost the air, he was like, I got to change it.
Time now for a fun game preview. The Ravens and the 49ers, perhaps the game of the regular season in many people's estimation. Let's begin on the San Francisco side. And the San Francisco offense faces a really, really good challenge in this Ravens defense. Not quite as dominant as the 49ers side, that much is for sure. But Tevin Coleman, Mike, seems to have sort of cleared the way. Did you want to add something here?
Are we skipping Jimmy Garoppolo on purpose?
I'm fine with. Do you want to go for it?
Yes, I do actually, because we're this conversation pre-show. I said to Kyle, I ranked Jimmy Garoppolo in the top 20. For those who don't know, only the top 20 show up.
Yeah.
So Kyle lists out for us what our rankings are, and it just said Jimmy Garoppolo not ranked, and I'm like, that does not represent all of us on the podcast, because I did rank him in the top 20.
Okay, Matthew, let's talk about a player that you have ranked not as a starter, but so far down, we need to make sure that we still mention him.
Okay, are there people playing with 2 quarterback leagues this week? Yes, there are.
No, all 2 quarterback leagues have been disabled for Thanksgiving week.
Stop talking. No, listen, I'm going to make my point about Jimmy Garoppolo because I'm sure everybody thinks I'm just a homer.
Okay.
But I do have him in my War Room League. I have 2 good quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson and him. And one week I started Deshaun Watson.
So you have one good quarterback?
No. So twice in a row, Jimmy, well, actually last week it was like 0.5 points difference, but twice Jimmy Garoppolo has outscored Deshaun Watson in recent weeks. So just to point out for people who are like, oh no, because I'm just tired of hearing criticism about my quarterback, so I have to go here. He's been double-digit fantasy points all but 2 weeks this season, if you didn't know. And last week, 18.2 fantasy points. The week before, 29.7 fantasy points. The week before, 10. That was the Seattle loss. I get it. That was a tough game. But the week before that, 28.9 fantasy points. So you could do worse than Jimmy Garoppolo if you need a different starter, because I just don't think he gets enough respect, and I just wanted to say that.
Imagine how good this team would be if Nick Mullins was still under center, though.
Oh, you're so...
You know what it is? I think what's happening is,
stop.
Jimmy Garoppolo, if he were handsome, we talk about him in a different light.
Seriously.
By the way, Baltimore only 9 passing touchdowns allowed this season, 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Niners still run heavy. Niners traveling all the way from San Fran to Baltimore.
Mike just
I'm not starting.
dousing Stephania with
let's board bet
How
this.
many
cold
times have
gravy
they
right
won
there.
when they've traveled east this year? Oh, that's right, every time.
Let's
Okay.
board bet this.
Well, I don't care if they win. We care about fantasy.
Stephania, you
points
think
here
he's...
on this
What do you have him ranked at?
Double-digit
Give him
fantasy
17.
points.
This
I
is
have
a
him at
very
17.
Matthew argument by
17.
Stephania.
No, I just felt that he needed to get
No, that's
mentioned
fair.
because
No,
he was
yeah.
on the sheet, and we went. Had you not put him on the
Okay,
sheet,
so for everybody who
I
plays in the
would've passed it
18-team
over.
leagues, he's definitely startable for all of those.
Yeah, it's debatable, but anyway. Listen, if you're in a 12-team start 2 quarterback league, then you have a case, I think.
Okay, so Stephania, I say Jimmy Garoppolo will not be a top 17 quarterback in
And you
week
really want
12.
to do this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
13. Week 13, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah?
I'll take you on.
Okay.
I say he will be a top 17 quarterback this week.
Put it on the board!
Put it on the board.
Put some real money on it. Put it in the jar, all right? Like,
Oh no, this
17
is
bucks.
Oh,
Out
that's
of the
such
jar.
a good saying. We should start doing that. Put it in the jar.
That's a good idea.
That is a good one.
What a good idea.
We should
Nice.
do that.
I like that.
I wish
Yeah.
I thought of that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm dealing with some FOMO here. I wish I thought of that one.
All right, let's move along from Jimmy Garoppolo to Tevin Coleman, who I think has sort of established himself as the go-to guy in that 49ers backfield, especially Stephania, because Matt Breida remains uncertain to return for them on Sunday.
He does, but all of a sudden it's interesting because it sounds like they think they think there's a possibility that Matt Breida could play this week. Now, obviously, 49ers haven't had a formal practice report yet, so you're going to want to watch and stay tuned. But at least the door is slightly ajar for Breida to play. If he doesn't, Tevin Coleman is without a doubt the number one.
How about Emmanuel Sanders, Mike? Because we all kind of have Coleman ranked right around number 20 for running backs, give or take a few slots. Emmanuel Sanders, though, became a little bit more interesting. Right when he was acquired, scores touchdown in his first two games. And all of a sudden, it's kind of been a little bit more of a quiet season.
He's been hurt.
Yeah, he's been hurt.
The injury's pretty bad. I mean, the rib injury, if you look at, he has not played more than 50% of the snaps the last 2 games. So
he did this past.
The 2 prior to this week.
Yep.
But what happened this week? George Kittle came back. So I think there's a couple of factors into why Emmanuel Sanders, and actually affected my rating for him as well. There's more pass catchers available.
So are we fading Emmanuel Sanders this week?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. His last 3 stat lines: 2 catches, 24 yards, 3 for 33, 1 for 15. Only 1 target this past week, despite actually playing 75% of the pass. He was on the field for 75% of the pass plays. So there's actually some reason for optimism that he's playing more. He's out in the field, but the one target. I mean, it's hard to trust him right now. I think I have him ranked, around 30th. So he's a borderline play. They should, by the way, have to throw more in this game. Again, it should be more competitive playing at Baltimore.
Right.
That's good for him. It should register more target volume. So he's still on the radar, but he's very risky.
Obviously, you're starting George Kittle. Deebo Samuel is sort of a long shot play here. He's been banged up. He had just 2 catches this past week. Mike mentioned all of the incredible stats in terms of opposing quarterbacks facing Baltimore. I can't imagine wide receivers have been much more successful, both statistically and from what we've seen on the eye test this year. I think the most interesting 49ers player this weekend is their defense, because their defense may be your fantasy MVP up to this point. 10-team league, Mike. If you have the 49ers defense, are you streaming to find somebody else to add for this week?
I'm trying to. I know I have them ranked right around in the 10 to 12 range, so it's borderline. It really depends on your other options. If you can get a team that's at the top end with a really
Philly
good matchup,
or something.
Yeah, like Carolina, a team like that, I would be totally fine with that. But otherwise, if I'm like, they're all pretty close, I might just fire them up, because even if they give up some points in this game, they could get 4 sacks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure,
they could maybe
absolutely.
get a turnover.
I was
they could
just
still
going to
make it a
say,
points of power.
sometimes to me, the defense is more and more, I look for where are the points that are not going to go away, and it's the turnovers. And it's like, I think that you could force turnovers on this team potentially. At least the 49ers have a chance to.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot. I mean, Lamar Jackson didn't fumble or turn the ball over once all of November. The dude has been rock solid. I'm an advocate for...
He doesn't have to be the one to turn the ball over.
That's fair. That's your only chance if somebody else turns it over. I'm an advocate for, if you do play with defenses in your league, and I know most people do, but some people ban kickers in defenses, is like, I don't like negative scoring for defense. Like, just keep it at positive, like 0 or positive scoring only, so that it's not a total... I mean, just the idea of like a negative 6 is an eyesore in your lineup, more so than anything else. Lamar Jackson definitely faces his toughest task, and that being said, we are not going to do anything other than play Lamar Jackson. He's the number 2 quarterback for each of us this week. I just mentioned how he didn't turn the football over once in November. Lamar Jackson is going to finish with the highest QBR
in history
for any quarterback in a single month. We started tracking the stat back in 2006, 97.1 for November. He also had 16 total touchdowns, passing and rushing combined, 0 turnovers. That's the most touchdowns without a turnover in a single month for any player in NFL history, according to the Elias Sports Bureau. It was a banner month for Lamar Jackson. He is the clear-cut MVP, and along those lines, if he has a dud, which I can't really imagine, I don't care. You're still playing him.
Yeah, he's been top 3 at quarterback 8 of 11 weeks.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's amazing.
Unreal. I mean, I'm starting to just, 1% of my brain thinking about next season already, and the offseason debate where to draft him is going to be worse than Mahomes. Like,
no
that
question. That's going to be
a debate for sure.
Top
I'm
15 type player next year, because the rushing upside is so substantial for him. Same thing goes for Mark Ingram. He had a monster night this past week, and I thought there was a chance that Mark Ingram might eventually concede some more carries to Justice Hill. Even Gus Edwards is getting a workload, and it still doesn't matter. Mark Ingram has been the closer for this team. He's been the touchdown scorer for this team. He's been involved in the passing game. The guy is incredible.
It's the way he's running, too. He is just mowing people down. It's fun to watch. It's like, you've seen a guy, you don't typically see a veteran who, I think, suddenly, after all this much time, is playing more physical than we've ever seen.
Really good player. He's been effective for them, and that's one of the better free agent add to the offseason.
Yeah, he's right up there, top 2 in yards per carry and yards after contact since entering the league. He's been, again, top 2. Think about how good that is. And, it's kind of, he's a tough one because he's handling like 40% of the carries and 9% of the targets and still getting you top 10 numbers because his offense has been so good. But I will say this, top 5 running back the past 2 weeks in fantasy points, 20th or worse 5 of the previous 6 weeks. So he actually was disappointing for a while, along with that Ravens offense for a short spurt there after that Miami game. But again, he's at least an RB2, so you're gonna start him for sure.
Mark Andrews has not been as prolific of late. He had just 2 catches this past Monday night, excuse me. Again, we talk about it this is now the 3,612th time this year we've talked about it. Tight ends are really hard to find. And if you have Mark Andrews, you probably don't have a better option. If for some reason you landed Mark Andrews as a late round ad because you had Travis Kelce early or something like that, then feel free to sit Mark Andrews. Other than that, you're probably playing Mark Andrews because, again, tight ends are impossible to find just for fun because it's the game of the weekend. Who you guys got in this one?
I have the Ravens.
I have the Ravens as well, though I've picked incorrectly against the 49ers on multiple occasions this year.
And
Daniel.
yet you haven't learned your lesson.
I know I haven't. Dan, who do you got?
I put out a poll during the Monday Night Football game, and literally 80% of the people said that they would take the Ravens over the 49ers. So I'm going to, because I'm a man of the people.
No recency bias or
I'm gonna
anything.
take
When
the
you're asking
Ravens.
people while they're watching that team, I mean.
Yeah. Have you watched Lamar Jackson play football, Stephania?
I have.
Okay.
Have you?
Because
Have you?
when everyone talks about him being a video game, like I feel like that's not enough. Like everyone
He is
else
a
is
video
Tecmo
game.
Bowl and he's like Madden 20.
Yeah.
Like if he's a video game, he's playing a totally different console than everybody else.
I haven't seen Lamar Jackson and Nick Bosa yet, though. So pretty
30 to
excited
22.
for that.
Well, it's going to be
Mike
fun
coming
when
in hot, 30-22.
30-22
Star
San
Fania, what do you
Francisco?
got?
Okay,
That's huge.
great.
30-22
Yeah.
Ravens.
Well, I
By the
got
way,
that
I'd
now.
like to be on the record last week that I was heavily on the Niners. Like I had them like an 8-point favorite, and the spread was about 2.5. And that worked out pretty well. So I'm not like anti-49ers. I was on them big time last week, but not this week. It's going to be tough. It's gonna be
It's
tough.
okay. It's okay for you to be wrong once. Of course, I'm going the
Are
Niners.
you kidding me? Be wrong once. Mike Clay is almost perfect all the time. He is in 5th out of 6th place in our Pigskin Pick'em standings.
Exactly.
That's just because I
It's
forget
impressive.
to enter my Thursday picks. Otherwise, I'd be crushing you all.
There are so many Matthews on this show.
I know, seriously.
Talk to us about how you're first in points, but not going to make the playoffs in one of your fantasy leagues too.
No, can't do that.
I'll
No.
do mine. You want me to go through mine?
No, I don't
Oh,
actually.
okay.
That was facetious. I didn't actually want you to do that.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Field.
Maybe later.
So I'm playing against Christian McCaffrey this week. He's finally going to go off. Because I'm playing against him this
It's
week.
about time.
It's about time Christian McCaffrey goes off.
I mean, of course, Christian McCaffrey would go off.
Christian McCaffrey's going to go off.
Of course.
Yeah. Fantasy Focus is brought to you by ADT. What does real protection mean for our listeners? You can get all of the latest innovation in smart home security from ADT combined with 24/7 monitoring for the most trusted name in home security. You get a team of professionals designing and installing a secure smart home just for you. You get 18,000 employees safeguarding them with connection to first responders. You get the nation's #1 smart home security provider. You can also get a secure smart home with everything from video doorbells, indoor and outdoor cameras, smart locks and lights, all controlled from the ADT app or the sound of your voice. You get professionally monitored carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. You can get a custom designed to fit your home. You can also get safety on the go in the car or when your kids are at school with the ADT Go app with an SOS button. ADT protects us. If you're going away for the holiday weekend, you want to make sure your home is protected. Go support ADT. And honestly, you're helping yourself out. Mike, before the show, or was that during the show or before the show? We were talking about Mike's distaste for Sam Darnold, which is incredible.
That was before the show.
Okay, before the
I
show.
assumed because Lamar Jackson, you guys have as 2, so I'm assuming you have Sam Darnold at 1 this
He's
week.
red hot, 21 plus points each of the past 3 weeks. And yet, I'm sitting here saying, start Sam Darnold. Stephania doesn't like him as much as she likes Jimmy Garoppolo,
That's
which at least has
correct.
him ranked. Michael Clay, he of ESPN fantasy fame, perhaps the smartest mind in fantasy sports, doesn't even have Sam Darnold ranked. What am I missing here?
Why do you hate Sam Darnold?
I'm just not fully in yet. I'm still nervous. I mean, they've been great against some bad defenses as of late. The
They're
Giants, the
playing the
Redskins. I know, I'm getting there. I
Bengals.
promise I'll get to that.
Okay.
Giants, Redskins, Raiders. He picked them apart, obviously. He was tremendous, but we also have a larger sample of games from him earlier this season where they could not score points, and he really struggled. I'm still nervous about that. Keep in mind, he is 13 touchdowns this season. He also has 10 interceptions. That's not very good. So he's been good as of late. Now let's talk about this Bengals defense quickly. Third most fantasy points on the quarterbacks. Yeah. Fine. But most of that, believe it or not, is rushing. They've been crushed by like Lamar Jackson, just 77 carries, 433 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's 67.3 fantasy points. That is most in the NFL by about 20 points. It's a huge margin. And if you don't consider rushing, then they're more mid-pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Sam Darnold doesn't do much with his legs, 20 carries for 38 yards this season. The Ravens defense has faced the fewest pass attempts in the league this season, the third fewest completions. They're mid-pack in passing yards and touchdowns allowed. So
the Bengals, you
again,
mean? You said the Ravens.
Did I say that right? Yeah, they're the Bengals, of course. So
okay.
Thank you. So anyway, I'm just still not fully in on Darnold. I want to be. I was optimistic before the draft last season, this season, but
can't a guy improve after he gets over mono? I mean,
yes.
I think to be fair, when Sam Darnold came back, I still think he was getting over having this disease that walloped him, for a while. And he's also a young guy who's improving. The past 2 weeks where he's been better, Cincinnati has also been worse, allowing a league-high 13.1 yards per completion, the most since the 2009 Dolphins. I think those two converging this week, good week for Sam Darnold, another bad week for the Bengals.
For those that don't know, Stephania is the most brilliant mind in all of the world. Not even just ESPN, not even fantasy sports, all of the world. Stephania Bell just said it. Start Sam Darnold this week. If I'm wrong, $12 into the swear jar.
$12, man, you're spending a lot.
Start Jimmy Garoppolo first, but then if you don't have him.
But other than Sam Darnold, is there any jet that, like with Le'Veon Bell, you're obviously starting. We feel good about Jamison Crowder this week, but can you make the case for another jet that's not Sam Darnold, that's sort of on the periphery that you would start, whether it's a Robbie Anderson type? Would you throw a dart at Demaryius Thomas here, Mike? The matchup is so bad, so good. The Bengals are so pathetic and bad. I have one thing that makes me scared about this game just a little bit, is that Andy Dalton is coming back for the Bengals, and I have just a teeny tiny shot in the arm that maybe the Bengals show an ounce of heart, because they haven't yet. And oh, by the way, the Bengals have a game to mess around with, right? They can afford to win a game. Up until this point, they could not afford to win a game because they would have lost the number 1 pick in the draft. Now they can actually win a game and potentially still have the number 1 pick in the draft. Maybe they make this game competitive. It does not change my mind on Sam Darnold, but does it change your mind on Robbie Anderson or Demaryius Thomas, Ryan Griffin, any of them worth a start for you?
No, I mean, listen, if I'm low on Darnold, I can't really be low on like the secondary parts of this offense. So Bell, yes. Crowder, yes. Robbie, I'm going to say no. I mean, touchdowns in back-to-back games of 5 or fewer targets in 4 straight games. Ryan Griffin has the occasional touchdown here or there, but he's risky. And with everybody back from the bye, you have, essentially 7 good tight ends with Austin Hooper out, and then you have a few other guys like your Greg Olsen, Jimmy Graham's, guys like that. So I don't know that he's a guy. He's certainly not in my top 10, certainly not my top 12 either. So I would stay away from those secondary pieces.
No risk it, Mike. Don't forget that. Can you play any Rams with confidence this week? The Rams, who, again, on Monday night, were just pathetic, an abject disaster in every single way, shape, and form. Now, in terms of the rankings, we still have Todd Gurley as a top 20 running back. It's a good matchup. We still have Cooper Kupp as a top 20 wide receiver. Matthew and I had an extensive conversation about this offense yesterday on the show. But, I mean, who are you starting with confidence this week?
The only other one's Robert Woods, I think. 20 targets over his past 2 games, 6 for 97, 7 for 95. That's very good production, 80-plus yards, 3 of his past 4 games. He'll get a lot of Byron Murphy, I think, in this game, because Peterson, I think, will shout out Brandon Cooks as he has in the past. But otherwise, I'm with you. I mean, Gerald Everett, ideally you'd use him in a great matchup here against Arizona.
Part of the reason I ranked him so low is I was literally like, I'm very iffy on him. This is a guy who's already banged up and then appeared to injure his knee this week during the game. Sean McVay calling him day-to-day right now. So it's not even guaranteed that Gerald Everett will start in this game.
Yeah, that's tough. Only 28 snaps over his past 2 games, 3 targets. Again, the Cardinals' worst against tight ends, which makes him interesting. Also, Jared Goff, Arizona's worst against quarterbacks as well, but he's been 26th or worse 3 straight times. So I think in a deeper league, if you're in trouble and want to throw a dart at maybe, they take advantage of the matchup, actually have a good game. Maybe Kupp has one of those 200-yard games like he had earlier this season. Maybe it could happen and help Goff to a good fantasy week, but it's very risky. And by the way, Brandon Cooks has really fallen off. 18 targets, 10 catches, 138 yards, no touchdowns in 4 games since week 5. That's 7 fantasy points per game. His target share's down. Goff has no time in the pocket, and that's what he needs, right? He's not mobile. He just needs time in the pocket to for Cooks to get open. It hasn't happened this season, and it's really crushed him.
I am really scared about what the narratives would be about the Rams if they lose this game, because they would be 6-6. There'd be a lot of people questioning a lot of things about Los Angeles. They got to find a way to get right. But the Cardinals are frisky, and they're coming off of their bye. We're taking a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Mike Clay, the ever-prolific Mike Clay, about wide receiver and cornerback matchups.
He's a brainiac, he's Mike Clay.
Except for when we're talking about Sam Darnold, then he's just a big dum-dum. Players who have a positive matchup this week, Mike, include DK Metcalf against the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football.
Indeed. Metcalf, and actually this is going to apply to Josh Gordon as well, because they both play on the perimeter. They're going to face off against this Vikings defense with Xavier Rhodes and especially Trey Waynes, who has struggled badly this season. Fourth most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, the most to the perimeter for the season and over the past month. Hard to believe the Vikings allowing the most fantasy points to the perimeter this season. Trey Waynes, as mentioned, he has struggled the most at left corner. The Vikings allowing the most fantasy points to that side of the field this season. Over the past 8 weeks, over the past month, they've just been beat up badly. Now, that is Josh Gordon's primary side. He's lined up there on 19 of his 32 routes since joining Seattle. Still not a full-time player, so we're talking maybe a DFS tournament flyer here. Still a risky play because the playing time's not there. But Metcalf, he's on the outside 83% of the time, also gets a big boost. He did have a dud last week in a good matchup against Philly, but 11-plus fantasy points in 7 of 11 games. Still number 2 in end zone targets. I think he'll be fine.
All right, let's move on to our weekly segment where we highlight how bad the Buccaneers' defensive backs are. This week they play the Jaguars in the battle for Florida. I guess technically Miami would also be included in this, but that's neither here nor there. Jaguars wide receivers, including DJ Chark, Mike, have a very good matchup on Sunday.
Yes, Chark, Conley, Chris Conley, of course, Dede Westbrook, all set up nicely here against Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and Sean Murphy bunting every week. The trio at corner for Tampa is like different, right? They're just rotating young guys in there trying to find something that sticks. And look, they were a little bit more effective last week, and still 3 Falcons wide receivers got to 11 fantasy points. 3 of them got to double digits, and they were actually better than they are efficiency-wise last week. They've allowed the most fantasy points to receivers on the season the past 8 weeks, the past month, second most to the perimeter on the season, most over the past 8 weeks. You have DJ Chark on the outside and Chris Conley over 3/4 of their routes. So obviously we're upgrading them. And also they've given up the most fantasy points to the slot, which is where Dede Westbrook is 86% of the time. Bucks most receiving yards and second most catches and touchdowns allowed to wide receivers this season. By the way, DJ Chark, double-digit fantasy points in 8 of 11 games. Westbrook's at 6 of 9 full games this season. They've already given you a pretty high floor. Now you add this matchup in. They should both be in lineups, I think.
Okay, so we go to the other side of the coin here, Mike, which is negative matchups where players face off against cornerbacks that are very, very good. You and I are having a conversation before the show just about the best cornerbacks in football. We are trying to decide who would be number one. I think the king right now is Stephon Gilmore. I don't think it's particularly close, but there are other really good ones as well. Christian Kirk, the Arizona Cardinals, face off a very good one in Ramsey.
Jalen Ramsey. You've heard of him.
Yes. I was trying to tee you up there.
Know that name?
Take it from
Okay,
yes.
you've heard of him?
Yes, I traded for him.
You traded for
In
him?
Madden, yeah. First round pick.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. All right, that makes sense. All right, that's what the Rams did too, actually.
Yes.
And since they got him, he has been a shadow corner. They've used him quite a bit so far. He shadowed Juju Smith-Schuster, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson. Since joining that team, his latest shadowing was against Robinson. Did a really good job in that game. This one's tough. I don't think it's for sure 100% he will shadow Christian Kirk, but I do think he will. Like, as you look at Larry Fitzgerald, you might think, well, he's the Hall of Famer, one of the best ever. Does that make sense? Ramsey's also the biggest corner for the Rams. Fitz is the biggest receiver for Arizona. We've seen Ramsey go to the slot at times, but I don't think he's going to, because Christian Kirk is the number one receiver now for the Cardinals. I think we've seen that evolve as this season has gone on. As a 25% target share, he lines up on the perimeter 88% of the time, which is where we would prefer Jalen Ramsey to be this season. And I said 88%. That's since they kind of transitioned him to the outside after starting out in a lot of 4 wide sets earlier in this season. But nonetheless, Ramsey, one of the best in the business. He should be on Kirk in a majority of this game. So we're definitely going to downgrade him. And I think, could this be the week? Andy Isabella is a deep sleeper. He's been playing more. He's basically their number 3 now. And he's going to draw Troy Hill away from that matchup. He's an interesting name.
Andy Isabella from UMass, deep sleeper for the week.
There you
go. Another difficult matchup for Cortland Sutton this week. After Tre'Davious White this past week, he faces off against Casey Hayward also part of the best cornerback in football group. He's just that good, Mike.
Yeah, Hayward's been doing it for a long time. He's been shadowing for years now. He's very terrific, very effective. Always a matchup we have to keep in mind. He's traveled with T.Y. Hilton, Marvin Jones, Nuke Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Corey Davis, and Sammy Watkins at least part of the time throughout the 2019 season. He also shadowed Cortland Sutton in the first meeting between these teams. He was on him on 19 of his 22 routes, including all 19 on the perimeter. He held Sutton to 2 catches for 18 yards and no touchdowns on 4 targets on those 19 plays. Of course, Sutton got loose for a 70-yard touchdown on one of the 3 plays he was away, where for some reason Denzel Perryman was lined up against him. But nonetheless, it is a very tough matchup. Hayward shadowed Sutton on all but 12 of his routes in the 2 meetings last year. His lines, 3 catches, 78 yards, and 1 catch for 25 yards. So he has a very successful resume in this matchup. Does Hayward definitely makes you a little bit nervous. We also saw Sutton. We talked about him last week because he had a tough matchup against Tre'Davious White, had 1 catch for 27 yards on 8 targets in that game. So we've seen him struggle a bit in tough matchups. This is another one against a Chargers defense that's allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers on the season and the fewest to the perimeter over the past 8 weeks, where, of course, Sutton lines up primarily. This is a very tough matchup.
Amongst the many pieces that Mike Clay has on ESPN.com throughout the week is Fantasy 32, Mike, which is one piece of intel covering each team. There are 32 of them in total. So let's move along to the Fantasy 32 portion of the show. And all of us agree, 10-team leagues, 12-team leagues, we're benching Matt Ryan on Thursday night.
Yeah, so you're starting Darnold over Matt Ryan.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay. I'm benching Matt Ryan as well. He opened the season with 300-plus yards in 6 consecutive games. He had at least 2 touchdowns in 5 of those outings. Since that point, 1 300-yard game. He has a total of 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That includes last week. They played Tampa Bay, right? That should have been a bounce-back game, a get-right game. He had 0 touchdowns in that one. I don't know what's happened. Since they fixed that offense, or since they fixed the defense, the offense has kind of fallen apart. It's been something else. They haven't scored more than 2 touchdowns in a game since week 6. It's just really hard to trust Ryan. And certain parts of this offense right now, you're still starting Julio, obviously, Ridley most weeks, Hooper when he's a go, but otherwise it's been problematic.
You know, I see what Mike's doing here, Stephania. He is ignoring the moment. I'm trying to live presently, right? I don't want to live with 1 foot in front of me and 1 foot behind me. I want to live presently, which is why Mike hasn't even ranked Ryan Tannehill. Now, let me ask you, Stephania, would you rather eat a can of cranberry sauce or start Ryan Tannehill this week? Because I don't think you want to start him based off your rankings either. What is wrong with you people?
I like Jimmy Garoppolo better.
Come on.
You're just starting Jimmy no matter what. If Stephania doesn't have Jimmy, she's just not starting
I'll move him into the 20th spot over a can of cranberry, though.
Oh, okay. Nailed it. Mike, tell me why Ryan Tannehill's value is not what it's perceived to be.
Oh, no. Oh, you have him 11th. You just like saying his name.
Give me that money, baby.
It's going to be
Ryan
interesting.
Tannehill.
I feel like it's a kind of like recency bias versus, what these players have done in their career and over the full season, because we're kind of seeing that with Darnold and Tannehill. So it's interesting. Tannehill, I'm sorry. Apologies for mispronouncing. But nonetheless, Titans offense has obviously been terrific since he took over. 6 touchdowns this past Sunday. They have 19 during Tannehill's 5 starts. And that's notable because that's 3.80 per game. That is almost where the Ravens are at this season at 3.82. That's an incredible pace they're on. 4 touchdowns Sunday for Tannehill on his own, 2+ in all 5 of his starts, 4 consecutive top 10 weeks. That's all great. The problem is quarterbacks, are very volatile in where they finish, and he is a tough matchup this week heading to Indianapolis. He also only attempted 18 passes this past week. So and you can't count on that sort of efficiency, right? It's unsustainable. He's not going to keep up any sort of the pace. He needs more volume, and maybe you'll get it in this game. It could maybe be a somewhat of a 24-21 sort of game. Maybe he scores a few touchdowns and balls out. But the Colts have a pretty good defense. It's on the road. I think maybe he comes back to earth in this one.
Okay, last one here from the Fantasy 32 is that DJ Moore maybe quietly has become a star wide receiver. I think people recognize him as a very good wide receiver, Mike. But is he becoming a great one?
I think so. Remember, he was the first receiver drafted in the NFL draft last season.
Oh, I remember.
There's plenty of pedigree here.
Maryland.
Yeah, Maryland, right. So he entered week 12 with 3 career touchdowns on 117 touches and was still the number 17 scoring fantasy receiver this year, right? So, I mean, he just throughout his career so far, he has not been able to score touchdowns. It's not really his fault. He hasn't gotten the ball near the goal line. Scored 2 touchdowns against the Saints on 9 targets at 126 yards. 95+ receiving yards now or more in 4 consecutive games. He has 8+ targets in 9 of 11 games, a huge 26% target share. he's right there in that top 10 conversation at wide receiver. And there's not really much else to say. You fire him up if you have him every week, regardless of matchup. He's too good right now.
Fire up our friend DJ Moore. He has been awesome. Before we talk about bounce back options, and I'm going to give Stephania a chance to rectify her opinion on cranberry sauce and other stuff during those bounce back options piece. Mike Lay has a word for us.
Is this true? Do I?
I do.
Oh, Stephania has it
Yeah, I was
instead.
gonna
Just
say.
kidding.
I was
Mine
gonna
says
say,
Mike.
I thought you were
you got me
I thought you
there.
were saying-
You caught me off guard. I was like, I don't
caught
have
you off
anything to
guard.
say.
That's my bad.
Yeah, I've been relegated. Okay. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult
All
on
the time.
purpose?
Oh,
Yes.
so much.
I know. It's as if they're so big, they can get away with not caring about the customer experience.
They can. It's crazy.
So what if their site's annoying and doesn't have the events you want? Hello, status quo.
Hey, status quo.
Hey, what's up? You are status quo. With millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves there's a better way. In an industry that tends to stagnate, SeatGeek decided to stand out from the crowd. They built the fastest way to find tickets, so you can stop searching for the perfect seat and start enjoying it. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, then it rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. And finally, SeatGeek displays them on an interactive seat map. SeatGeek breaks down the details. Green dots mean good deals, and red dots are overpriced. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today. Use promo code FFF for $10 off on your first purchase. That's promo code FFF for $10 off on your first purchase.
Thank you, Stephania, and thank you to all those that support this podcast. So let's talk about some players that have a chance to bounce back this week. Maybe a down in the dumps week 12. They didn't play in week 12 entirely. Things of that nature. And I'm going to begin. I want you guys to hear me out.
I laughed when you picked this one.
Okay.
Okay. I
Why?
did.
Tom Brady?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing
Is he
at that?
good?
Well, but was he good last week?
No.
Has he been good for a while?
No.
Thank
He's
you.
been mediocre.
Bounce back options here.
But he's a
Mediocre.
good player. And
Of course he's
league
a good-
history, though, right? Like, is he?
Yes, he has a chance to be a good player. If
Okay,
he
I
puts
think-
it all together, I think he's had
good.
a chance to put together a
Just
decent
saying.
resume.
I mean,
I've heard of him. I've
maybe
heard
he
Thomas.
can bounce
Brady,
back.
The Pharaoh.
Yeah, your pick is a guy that makes $18 million a year, and Stephania's pick is the runaway rookie of the year. So, don't chop down my pick of Tom Brady until you guys get to go up there and
Okay.
have your piece as well. But the Texans have allowed over 18.5 fantasy points to a quarterback 7 times this season. It may not feel this way, but Tom Brady has 4 finishes as a top 7 quarterback this year, and the Patriots are getting into the red zone a lot. They have the second most red zone drives per game. It's been finishing those drives that's been an issue. What I think, though, needs to be pointed out about Tom Brady and some of his recent struggles. If you think about the Patriots' home games of late and just sort of their games in general, it's been a major issue for them this year. And yes, there's some concerns about the talent and all that. Weather has really slowed them down.
Mm-hmm.
They have played in some really bad weather spots. I'm just saying from a fantasy standpoint, does that matter or does it not matter? You tell me. I'm trying to give people good insight here.
I know.
And
But I just think the Patriots should be used to weather.
Yeah, they're 10-1, Stephania. Of course they're used.
But we're talking
they're
about
not worried about.
bounce back of it.
From a fantasy perspective,
Okay.
Tom Brady has been bad of late. He is going to. I think he has a chance to bounce back on Sunday night against a Houston defense that cannot rush the passer right now. They have very bad cornerback play. I think this game being played indoors, weather should not be an issue as far as I am concerned. And the Patriots, it may not be perfect in terms of wide receivers, but we at least saw N'Keal Harry make a positive play last week. We'll see if Mohamed Sanu or Philip Dorsett play on Sunday, dealing with an ankle and a concussion, respectively. I think it's a chance for the Patriots to put together a decent offensive effort and for Tom Brady to be a top 10 play this week.
I'm just
fantasy.
teasing you, Field,
Okay.
because the Patriots are 10-1, but offensively they haven't been super impressive.
Sure, I mean, no question about it. They have a
So
lot
I
to
understand
be
where you're
left to
going
be
with
desired.
that.
So yes, I think people right now, we've talked about Tom Brady, could be droppable, I think, this week, and provided it's on a monsoon against Kansas City next week, should be in a pretty good spot to chew up some fantasy points over the next month or so.
Yeah, I have him on a team. Obviously, he's underwhelmed the past few weeks. I'm going to start him here. Like you said,
should
he's
start Jimmy
indoors.
Garoppolo.
I'm not going to do that. The Texans, as you mentioned, top 10 in fantasy points allowed, pass attempts, completions, passing yards, passing touchdowns with 22. Only have 21 sacks. Right, only 5 interceptions this season. Right, they've really struggled, as you mentioned, across the board. So, yeah, I think it sets up well for a bounce back game. I'm going to fire him up.
Tom Brady is my pick. Mike, who is your pick?
My pick is Alshon Jeffrey.
All righty.
Yes, just a guy who I know he's been frustrating because he always misses a couple games and he just seems like he's not doing much out there, but he always seems to deliver wide receiver 2 numbers in fantasy. He's been doing it year after year after year since joining the Eagles. Look at his target numbers this season: 6, 9, 8, 12, 5, 6, and 8. That's 7.7 per game. That is his highest since joining the Eagles. It's a 22% target share. He has 4 touchdowns in his limited action this season. He's the number 15 scoring fantasy receiver during the 7 weeks he has played in full, and a great matchup in Miami. Speaking of nice weather, playing the Dolphins, they've given up the most touchdowns with 19 to wide receivers, as well as the 7th worst yards per target. They've 9th most fantasy points allowed to that position. Obviously, they have a rotation problems at cornerback. If he's healthy, if he's able to go, Stephania, we'll keep an eye on that, obviously, into the weekend. If he's able to go, though, I want him in my lineup.
And Stephania, your pick.
It's not a 49er.
So Barry Sanders, Jerry Rice.
We don't need to bounce back because we're 10-1. No, it's Josh Jacobs, who I actually have on a couple fantasy rosters. Pardon?
Across the bay.
Yep.
Across the bay, yeah, I know. I throwing some love to the Raiders. Goes against the grain for me, but no, I have a lot of respect. And if you watch Hard Knocks, we talked about Josh Jacobs. He's a really interesting kid coming out of Alabama. Everybody thought that one thing no one questioned was his work ethic. I think he's proven that, playing with a shoulder injury that's had him on the injury report virtually since the first month of the season. He came out of the gates with a bang, 23 fantasy points in his very first game, then back down to earth at single-digit fantasy points, and then kind of found his way again and has been double-digit fantasy points every week except for 2. One of those being the worst production he's had, which was last week, 4 fantasy points. I had to double-check that because it was so low. I was trying to forget it. Running back 43 last week. But from weeks 5 to 11, he was running back 4 on a per-game basis. Has a good matchup against Kansas City, allowing the 2nd most yards per carry at 5.1 and the 3rd most rushing yards per game. I think it's a nice game for Josh Jacobs.
I tell you what, so I agree with what you said. We all have him ranked as a top 10 play this week. The Raiders were supposed to be 7-4 going into this game because they were supposed to beat the Jets last week and have a chance to take the AFC West division lead with a win over the Chiefs on Sunday. And then they flatlined and they got their tail kicked last week by the Jets. So this week, everybody's saying I think ESPN's FPI gives them a 10% chance of winning. Doesn't that mean it's going to be a close game because of that? Right? Like rather than it being a Chiefs blowout, it's going to be a close game because all the signs point towards a blowout. That's just how football, it's just Murphy's Law of football, right?
And I also think I didn't understand what was happening last week. Just really, they looked completely out of sync. Like they couldn't get anything going.
Totally out of sync.
I feel like this is going to be a regrouped Raiders team coming. Look, it's tough. It's at Arrowhead.
Well done.
There you go.
Yeah,
You're on
we
it.
haven't been able to hit that in a while. But honestly, this is a tough matchup for them. But that being said, I think Josh Jacobs has a big game.
They've been really good at home, struggling on the road. It was kind of you could understand why the Jets won that game. I was surprised it was that much of a blowout, but. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they get back on track in this one.
So you've heard our takes about players we think will bounce back. But Daniel, tell us what IBM Watson has to say about who made the best call.
Yeah, here's the thing. We like to use Watson when it's a close call, trying to decide which way we want to go with this. Watson doesn't actually think it's all that close. Alshon Jeffrey has the greatest difference between his boom and bust chances, having a 22% chance to exceed 17 points this week. That means that IBM Watson and Mike Clay are simpatico for right now in week.
Simpatico.
Daniel just left.
I was going to say a thing at the end of the podcast, and I'm not going to do it anymore, Stephania.
Don't pout.
I love the upside that Alshon Jeffrey has this week, as does Mike Clay. We're going to see as far as a bounce back option. I'm going to monitor all 3 of these. We're going to come back and we're going to decide which one he was right, which one he was wrong next week.
All Alshon Jeffrey has to do is actually play, and then Mike has a chance.
There we go.
Mike certainly has a chance. Great show, guys. Thank you for all the insight there, Stephania and Daniel. Mike, we'll talk about Sam Darnold later. More seriously, we have a lot to be thankful for. This is a great few days ahead. We hope that everybody who is listening or watching right now spend some quality time with family and you have a chance to consume some of your favorite Thanksgiving sides, whether we disagree with your preferences or not. But we are perpetually and eternally grateful for the support of this podcast. It has been a banner season for the 06010. We put out a press release about how October we had the best numbers ever. We hope to keep that momentum rolling, and just know that what keeps everybody going is not just our love for fantasy football and what we do, but for the fans that are, in our opinion, actually, this isn't even an opinion, it's a fact. They're unparalleled.
They're
they are
the best. I mean, and you know what? We love, I personally love the stories, the tweets that you share. I got one, I don't know if you guys saw, I don't have the tweet in front of me. So I can't give him the proper shout out, but he was doing a dietetic rotation. He'd gone to Africa and he left his wife in charge of his fantasy lineup and told her to listen to our show. And do you see that? She went 5-0 in his absence. And during the playoffs. Awesome. So he shared a picture.
Spencer Wynn is
Africa.
Who this was. Spencer
Shout
Wynn.
out to Spencer Wynn.
Awesome.
That's awesome. We keep marriages afloat.
Yeah, a picture when he was in Africa and a picture of the two of them, him and his wife together. And I was like, okay, now that you're back, don't ruin her mojo. Cool. She's done a great job. Cool. Like, let her go all the way. But I mean, it's things like that. So we appreciate. Keep sharing those.
I think you got
with
Wally Pipp there. She's in charge now.
Right. She is indeed in charge. The wife is always the boss.
I want to really quickly say something. I'm going to try really hard not to get emotional when I say it. But I just want to say thank you to all of you. 2019 has been a year for all of us in general. And so if you followed me on social media, you've seen that there's been some stuff. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because for our listeners and our viewers, the people that we get to work with on a daily basis, both on this side of the glass and on the other, is just the most wonderful, amazing thing. I can't believe that we get to do this as a job. And so everything that you think about these people that you listen to every single day, they are more beautiful human beings than you could imagine and expect, and their friendship and their love goes so far past this studio in this control room. And so I want to make sure that all of our people know it's not just about fantasy, like who you guys are as people. I am so thankful for everything that you guys have done. As I know everyone, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that, but I'm going to leave it at that. I love all of you guys.
Oh,
and you guys are amazing. I'm so thankful for everyone here.
We're going to leave it,
including Matthew, even though he's not here.
I'll give you a hug later. Virtual hug.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Oh.
We're going to leave it at that, too. To everybody who works on this show in all capacities. We're thankful for you, for all the fans, listeners, the downloaders, you name it. Thankful for you guys. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Peace out.
He's a NASCAR guy with a basement shrine, a Langford fan for life. Chargers are off to a terrible start, but that won't change his mind. Matching up all the cornerbacks, touchdown regression and weekly stats. But if your team falls flat, he's the one to blame. He's a brave